On a dusty, sun-baked road stretching across the countryside, a young woman walked slowly, her eyes cast down at the ground. Her name was Maya, though she had forgotten what it truly meant to feel alive, to feel hope. All she felt now was exhaustion, a deep, soul-wearied kind of tiredness that weighed heavily on her heart. She had been walking for hours or maybe days, it was hard to tell. The road seemed endless, just like the darkness that clouded her mind. Maya had come from a small town, a place that felt as cold and empty as the home she had grown up in. The walls of her house had never offered any comfort, and the people in her life, whether family or friends, had never understood her. They couldn't see the struggle, the battle inside her. They only saw what they wanted to see, a quiet, sad girl who never seemed to fit in. But no one knew the real story of her pain. No one knew the nights she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wishing for things to be different. No one knew the times when she felt as though the world was too heavy to carry, and every step forward felt like it was pulling her deeper into an abyss. She had tried everything to fix herself, to fill the emptiness with distractions, with people who didn't understand, with promises that things would get better, but none of it worked. In the end, Maya felt as though she had nothing left to give, and nothing left to hope for. As she walked down the dirt road, she came across a farm. The fields stretched out on both sides, the crops swaying gently in the breeze. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the land. It was beautiful in a quiet, peaceful way, but to Maya, it seemed like just another reminder of how far she had fallen. She didn't know why she had come to this farm, but there was something about the simplicity of the place that drew her in. Perhaps she thought that if she could escape the noise of the world for a while, she might find some peace. Or maybe deep down she knew that she needed something, anything that could pull her out of the darkness. It wasn't long before she noticed a figure in the distance. A man, dressed in old weathered clothes, was tending to the fields. He worked slowly and methodically, each movement deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world. Maya hesitated for a moment. She wasn't sure if she should approach him. What would she say? What would he think of her? But the loneliness inside her pushed her forward. She took one step, then another, until she was standing just a few feet away from the man. He didn't notice her at first, lost in his work. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she took in the sight of him. A simple farmer, probably in his late 50s or early 60s, with a face weathered by years of hard labor under the sun. His hands were calloused, his shirt stained with sweat, but there was a quiet strength in him, a kind of peace that seemed to radiate from his every movement. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Her throat felt tight, and for a moment she wondered if she could even do this. Could she ask for help? Could she share the pain she had been hiding for so long? The man finally looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers. He saw her standing there, looking lost and fragile, and for a moment he didn't know what to say. He could tell that something was wrong, but he didn't know what. He had lived a simple life, filled with the rhythm of farming and the cycles of nature, but he had always believed that kindness was the answer to most things. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his voice low but warm. Maya stood still, unable to speak. She felt as though the weight of the world was pressing down on her chest. She wanted to tell him everything, to pour out all the pain and sorrow that had been building up inside her for years, but the words were stuck. Instead, she did something unexpected. She slowly pulled a small, cold object from the pocket of her coat. It was a gun. She had been carrying it with her for days, unsure of why, but knowing deep down that she had no way out of her misery. The thought of ending everything had crossed her mind more than once. And in that moment, standing before this stranger, the idea seemed almost comforting. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "end my pain." The words hung in the air, and for a moment everything seemed to freeze. The man's eyes widened in surprise, but there was no fear in them, only concern, and something else that Maya couldn't quite place. He took a step toward her, his gaze soft but steady. "Maya," he said, using her name though he had never met her before. "Put the gun down, miss. You don't need this." The words were simple, but they struck her like a lightning bolt. She froze, her hand trembling around the gun. How did he know her name? She hadn't said a word about it. But there was something about his tone, something that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely invisible. "No one can help me," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "I've tried. I don't want to hurt anymore." The farmer took another step closer, his presence calm and reassuring. I can't pretend to know what you're going through, Maya, but I know that you don't want to end your life. There's more to you than this moment of pain. Trust me." Maya looked at him, her eyes filled with confusion and hopelessness. She felt a whirlwind of emotions, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she considered that he might be right. Maybe she didn't want to die. Maybe she just needed someone to see her, to understand the depth of her suffering. "Please," she said again, her voice shaking. "I don't know what to do anymore." The farmer stood still, his eyes never leaving hers. "You don't have to do anything right now, Maya. You're not alone. I can help you. But you have to put the gun down." And for the first time in what felt like years, Maya did just that. She slowly lowered the weapon, her hand shaking as she placed it gently on the ground. It wasn't the end of her pain, but it was a beginning she hadn't expected, but one that she would soon realize was the first step towards something much bigger. For a long moment, Maya stood frozen, the gun now lying forgotten on the ground at her feet. Her hands trembled, her chest rising and falling with quick, shallow breaths. She couldn't believe what she had just done. In that split second, she had made a choice, a small one, but still a choice to listen instead of end it all. The farmer didn't rush her. He remained standing a few steps away, his posture calm, his eyes kind but firm. His presence was a stark contrast to the chaos inside her. Maya felt small and unsure, her thoughts spinning. She had just opened the door to something she wasn't ready to face, something bigger than her pain. But for some reason, she didn't feel entirely afraid. There was something in the man's steady gaze, something that told her she wasn't alone. She slowly looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you helping me?" The farmer smiled gently, but it wasn't a smile of pity or judgment. It was simple, warm, like someone who had lived a full life and learned that there was always room for one more person, one more story. "Because you don't have to go through this alone," he said quietly. "Nobody should have to, not even someone like you." Maya wasn't sure what he meant by that, but she felt a weight lift off her chest just a little bit. She hadn't expected to hear those words. She had expected someone to tell her to walk away, that it wasn't their problem, or to call for help in a way that would make her feel even more alone. But instead, this stranger, the farmer, was offering something different. "I don't even know you," she said, her voice shaky. "I'm just some stranger on your land. Why would you care?" The farmer nodded slowly, as if he understood what she was asking. He turned his back on her for a moment, walking to a nearby wooden bench and sitting down with a tired sigh. He gestured for her to join him. "Sometimes, Maya, it's not about knowing someone. It's about seeing them, truly seeing them for who they are. I see you're hurting. I see you need someone to listen. I'm not here to fix everything, but I can walk with you for a bit if that's all right." Maya hesitated. She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him he couldn't possibly understand, that he had no idea what it felt like to be in her shoes. But then she thought about it. She had spent so many years carrying her pain alone, thinking that nobody would ever care enough to see her beyond her sadness. Maybe, just maybe, this man, this simple, weathered farmer, could give her something that everyone else had failed to offer: patience, kindness, and the belief that she was worth saving. She sat down beside him, keeping a careful distance at first, unsure of how to interact. Her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was as if the land itself had paused for a moment, letting the quiet settle in, letting them both just breathe. After a long while, the farmer spoke again, his voice soft but steady. "What brought you here, Maya? I can tell you've been carrying a heavy burden, but I can't help if you don't tell me what's on your heart." Maya stared at the ground, her thoughts whirling. She wasn't sure where to begin. Her life had been full of pain, so much pain that it was hard to know how to explain it. But somehow, in the stillness of the evening, with this stranger who didn't look at her like she was broken, she felt something stirring inside her. She wanted to speak, to release everything that had been trapped for so long. She started, her voice breaking. "I don't even know where to begin." The farmer nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "Start with what's the hardest for you to say, if that's what helps." Maya closed her eyes, a lump forming in her throat. She could feel the tears welling up again, but this time they felt different. She didn't feel ashamed of them. She didn't feel like she had to hide her tears. It was as if for the first time she was allowed to feel everything, without fear, without judgment. "I've been running from my past," she said, her voice quiet but growing stronger. From everything that happened when I was younger. The things people said to me, the things they didn't say, the things I never had the courage to say. I never felt like I fit in. I've been trying to fix myself, but every time I try, I just feel more broken. The farmer listened intently, nodding slowly. It's a hard thing, isn't it? Trying to fit in when you feel like you don't belong anywhere. He paused, then added, but just because the world doesn't give you a place doesn't mean there's no place for you. Sometimes it takes a while to find it. Maya turned her face toward the setting sun, watching the orange and pink hues stretch across the sky. It was beautiful in a way that made her heart ache. She had forgotten what beauty felt like. She had forgotten what it felt like to notice the world around her. I don't know if I'll ever find a place, she whispered, almost to herself. I feel like I'm too broken to belong anywhere. The farmer didn't answer right away. He simply sat there, his hands folded in his lap, his gaze resting on the horizon. Maya watched him, wondering what he was thinking. He didn't seem to have any answers, and yet he wasn't rushing her to feel better. He wasn't pushing her to move on, to get over it. He was just here, offering his presence, offering his time. Finally, he spoke. Sometimes we think we're broken because we've been taught that to be whole. We need to fit some idea of perfection. But that's not true. We're all just people, trying to make sense of this world, trying to heal. The way you heal might not look like anyone else's, but that doesn't make it any less valuable, and you don't need to be perfect to be worthy of love or kindness or a second chance. Maya looked at him, surprised by the tenderness in his words. She had expected him to be like the others, offering quick fixes, quick answers. But the farmer wasn't offering anything like that. He was offering something far more rare: understanding. For the first time in a long time, Maya didn't feel like she was burdening someone with her pain. She felt seen, and that made all the difference. She took a deep breath, as if the weight of the world had lessened just a little bit. It didn't mean the pain was gone. It didn't mean she was healed. But it meant that she had taken a small step toward something better. Toward hope. The farmer smiled again, a quiet, knowing smile. You don't have to have all the answers today, Maya. Just take it one step at a time. Maya nodded, feeling the weight of his words sink in. Maybe she didn't need to have all the answers. Maybe for now it was enough to just keep going. The days after that moment on the farm felt different for Maya. It wasn't as if all her pain had vanished or that the world had suddenly become bright and easy to face. But something had shifted inside her. Something she couldn't explain. Every time she thought about the farmer's kind eyes and steady words, it felt like a small flicker of hope had been kindled inside her heart. She found herself returning to the farm each day. At first, she hadn't known why. Maybe it was the simple, calming routine of the farmer's work, or maybe it was because he had become the first person who hadn't tried to fix her, but had instead let her be exactly who she was, broken, but still worth something. Maya would arrive in the late afternoon, when the sun was low and the cool evening breeze began to settle in. She wasn't sure what to do when she got there, but the farmer always had something for her to do. Sometimes it was feeding the chickens, other times it was gathering eggs from the coop. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to keep her busy. Enough to help her forget for a while the weight of the past that still clung to her like an old coat. Maya didn't speak much in the beginning. She was still trying to figure things out, still unsure if she was truly ready to face her past or the emotions she had hidden away for so long. But each day, as the work on the farm became part of her routine, she felt a little bit stronger. She started to notice the small things, the way the flowers bloomed in the garden, the soft rustle of the wind through the trees, the smell of fresh earth after the rain. Things she had once ignored in the rush of life now felt important, even beautiful. The farmer didn't push her to talk. He didn't ask her to open up. Instead, he just gave her the space to be. And it was in that space, that quiet time spent together without expectation, that Maya began to feel the first stirrings of something inside her. She wasn't sure what it was. Maybe it was healing, or maybe it was just a simple shift in perspective. But whatever it was, it felt like the beginning of something new. One evening, after they had finished their work for the day, the farmer invited her to sit with him by the porch. The sun had just set and the sky was painted in shades of orange and purple. The air was cool and the sounds of the evening, the chirping of crickets, the distant croak of a frog, filled the silence around them. Maya sat beside him, her hands resting on her lap. For a long time, neither of them spoke. It was as if the calmness of the evening invited them both to simply be present in the moment. Finally, the farmer broke the silence. His voice was soft but steady. "How are you feeling, Maya?" Maya looked at him, surprised by the question. It was simple, yet it felt like a lot more than just a casual inquiry. The weight of his question was heavy, and she knew it wasn't a question he was asking out of politeness. He wanted to know. He cared. She thought about it for a moment, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The sky was darkening and the first stars were beginning to appear. "I'm not sure," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. "I still feel like there's something missing. Like there's a part of me that I can't find, but I don't feel as lost as I used to. And that's something." The farmer nodded, his gaze never leaving the horizon. "It's a good thing," he said quietly. "Sometimes when you're lost, it's the hardest thing to remember. That just because you're lost doesn't mean you're broken." Maya turned her head to look at him. His face was lined with age and experience, but there was a softness in his eyes, a wisdom that came not from books or theories, but from living. He had seen hardship and he had seen joy. And somehow he seemed to know that there was no clear path to healing. It was a process, a journey that took time. She swallowed, her throat tight. "I've never been good at letting people in. I've always felt like I had to fix everything on my own, even if it meant carrying the burden alone." The farmer turned to her then, his eyes meeting hers. "It's not a weakness to ask for help, Maya. It's not a weakness to let someone in." Maya's heart pounded in her chest. His words hit her harder than she had expected. She had always prided herself on being strong, on standing on her own 2 feet. But the truth was she had been running for so long. Running from her pain, running from her past, running from the people who might have been able to help her if she had only allowed them in. "I'm scared," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I'm scared of letting people see the real me. I'm scared of being rejected, of not being enough." For the first time since she had arrived on the farmer reached out and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like a lifeline. "Maya," he said softly, "you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be anyone other than who you are. And you don't have to do it alone." The weight of his words pressed against her chest, and she felt something inside her crack open. It wasn't like a loud, dramatic moment. It was quiet, a gentle release of the pressure that had been building up for years. Maya's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in a long time she let herself cry. The tears came slowly at first, like a stream breaking through a dam that had been holding back the flood for too long. She didn't try to stop them. She didn't try to hide them. She let them come, each one carrying away a little piece of the pain that had been buried deep inside her. The farmer didn't say anything. He didn't try to console her with empty words or quick fixes. He just sat there, his hand still resting on her shoulder, offering her the simple gift of his presence. Maya didn't know how long she cried, but eventually the tears slowed, and her breathing became less ragged. She wiped her eyes, feeling a little embarrassed, but the farmer didn't make her feel ashamed. He simply nodded, as if he understood. When the last of the tears had dried, Maya sat back, feeling both exhausted and strangely lighter. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, she felt like she could finally exhale. "Thank you," she said, her voice hoarse. The farmer smiled at her, his eyes kind. "You don't need to thank me. You're not alone, Maya. You never have been." And for the first time in a long time, Maya believed him. The days turned into weeks, and Maya found herself returning to the farm more regularly. It wasn't that she had nowhere else to go. It was more that she didn't want to be anywhere else. Each visit brought with it a sense of peace, a feeling she hadn't known for a long time. There was something about the quiet rhythm of the farm, the steady pace of the work, and the farmer's calming presence that made her feel like she could breathe again. The early mornings were her favorite time. The sun would just be rising over the horizon, casting a soft golden light across the fields. The farmer would be up early, tending to the animals, watering the plants, and doing all the little tasks that kept the farm running. Maya would join him, and together they'd move in silence, each of them lost in the simplicity of the work. In the beginning, Maya struggled to focus. Her mind would wander, her thoughts heavy with the weight of her past. She wanted to be present, to focus on the task at hand, but it was difficult. There were days when she felt like she was carrying the world on her shoulders, and the weight of it would drag her down. But then the farmer would speak, not in a rush or with any expectation, but in his calm, quiet way, reminding her that it was okay to take things slowly, that healing wasn't a race. One day after they had finished working in the fields, the farmer suggested they take a break by the old oak tree near the edge of the property. It was his favorite spot, a place where he could sit and watch the world go by. The tree had been there for as long as he could remember, its wide branches reaching up to the sky, offering shade and shelter to anyone who needed it. Maya sat down beside him, feeling the rough bark against her back. The breeze was cool, and the scent of fresh grass filled the air. For a while, neither of them said anything. It was as if the world was holding its breath, giving them the space to just exist together. Finally, the farmer broke the silence. "How are you feeling now, Maya?" Maya took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the edges of the rough bark. She thought about the question, about how much had changed since she first arrived at the farm. She thought about the tears she had shed, the long talks they had shared, and the quiet moments of peace she had come to cherish. "I feel better," she said slowly, her voice softer than it had been when she first arrived. "I'm not healed yet. I don't think I'll ever be completely healed. But I feel lighter, like I can breathe without so much weight in my chest." The farmer nodded, his eyes watching a bird fly past overhead. "Healing doesn't happen all at once," he said. "It's like planting a seed. You don't see the change right away, but every day it's growing. It takes time, but it's moving forward." Maya smiled at that. The comparison made sense. She had always expected healing to be a sudden thing, a moment when everything would magically get better, but now she realized it wasn't about one moment. It was about the small steps, the quiet changes that happened every day without her even noticing. "I never thought I could be happy again," she said, her voice tinged with wonder. "I thought my past would always control me, that I'd always be stuck in that place of pain and fear." The farmer turned to her, his eyes kind but firm. "Your past doesn't define you, Maya. It's part of your story, yes, but it doesn't have to be where your story ends. You get to decide what comes next." Maya looked at him, feeling a sense of gratitude fill her heart. She didn't know what her future would hold, but for the first time in a long time she felt like it could be something good. The pain that had once felt unbearable was no longer the loudest thing in her mind. It was still there, a quiet shadow, but it wasn't all-consuming. She was learning to live with it, to accept it, and to move forward despite it. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how I can ever thank you enough for what you've done for me." The farmer smiled softly, his face warm with understanding. "You don't need to thank me. You're the one who's doing the work. All I've done is walk beside you, offer a little guidance. You've done the hardest part, choosing to keep going even when it felt impossible." Maya felt a lump form in her throat. She had always thought of herself as weak, as someone who couldn't handle the challenges life threw her way. But sitting there in the quiet company of the farmer, she realized that she had more strength than she had ever given herself credit for. For weeks, the farmer had shown her a kind of quiet wisdom, one that didn't demand instant results or perfection. He had given her space to grow, to stumble, and to rise again. And through it all, he had never once made her feel like she was a burden. Instead, he had treated her with the same patience and respect he would show a friend or a loved one. One afternoon, as the season was beginning to change, Maya found herself working in the garden, her hands deep in the soil. It had become one of her favorite tasks, planting new seeds, pulling weeds, and watching the little plants grow day by day. There was something satisfying about it, something that helped her to focus on the present moment rather than the weight of the past. The farmer stood nearby, watching her as she worked. After a few moments, he spoke again. "You know, Maya, you've made a lot of progress since you first came here. I've seen you change, even if you don't always notice it yourself." Maya looked up, surprised by his words. "You really think so?" The farmer nodded. "I do. I can see it in the way you carry yourself now. There's a peace in you that wasn't there before. You're no longer running from your pain. You're learning to live with it, to face it head on." Maya smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She wasn't fully healed, and there were still days when the weight of her past felt too much to bear. But she had learned something important on this farm, something she hadn't expected when she first walked through the gate. She had learned to live. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but to keep moving forward, one step at a time. As she continued to work, planting new seeds in the rich earth, she realized that the healing process was not about rushing toward an end, but about embracing the journey itself. Each day, each small effort was part of something bigger, a journey toward a better version of herself. And for the first time in years, Maya felt ready to continue that journey, no matter how long it took. The farmer watched her with quiet pride. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy for her, but he also knew that she had begun to walk it with more strength and courage than she had ever believed possible, and that in itself was something worth celebrating. The seasons changed as the weeks passed. The crisp chill of autumn gave way to the cold bite of winter, and soon the farm was blanketed in snow. The landscape was quiet, peaceful, almost magical. Maya, however, no longer saw it as the empty stretch of land that had once overwhelmed her. Now it felt like home. The fields and trees once foreign to her had become familiar. She knew where the chickens laid their eggs, where the sunflowers grew tallest, and the place where the farmer's old dog liked to nap in the afternoon. Though the weather had turned colder, Maya felt warmer inside than she ever had before. The darkness that had once consumed her heart had begun to lift bit by bit. Each day on the farm felt like another step forward. She no longer came to the farm feeling lost or unsure. Now she came with a sense of purpose. Each task, whether feeding the animals or working in the garden, was part of a rhythm that made her feel grounded. She had found a place in the world, even if it was just in the simple moments spent among the quiet of nature and the steady presence of the farmer. On a bright morning, just before the snow began to fall, the farmer invited Maya to join him in the barn. He had something he wanted to show her. When she arrived, she found him standing beside a small pile of hay, a wide smile on his face. "Maya," he said, his voice warm, "I've been thinking a lot about how far you've come, and I think it's time for you to take the next step. This farm isn't just my home anymore. It's become a place where you can start your own journey. Your own future." Maya looked at him surprised. "What do you mean?" The farmer gestured to the barn. "I've been working on a small project here. A little something that I think will help you feel more connected to this place, more like it's yours too." Maya's heart fluttered in her chest as she approached the barn. Inside there was a small area set up with tools, a few gardening supplies, and a workbench. It was humble, nothing grand, but it was a space that had clearly been set aside for her to use, for her to make something of. "I've been saving some space here for you to start your own little project," the farmer explained. "You've always enjoyed working in the garden, and I think you've got a gift for it. So I'm giving you a place to nurture that talent. You can start your own garden or work on whatever you like. It's yours now." Maya was speechless, her eyes welling up with tears. She had never imagined this moment. She had never expected someone to believe in her, to offer her something so meaningful, so full of potential. She had spent so long believing she was unworthy of such kindness, but here it was, right in front of her. "I don't know what to say," Maya whispered, overwhelmed by emotion. "You don't have to say anything," the farmer replied, smiling. "Just use it. Make it your own. This is the next chapter of your story, Maya. It's yours to write." Maya nodded, her chest tight with gratitude. She took a deep breath, feeling a new sense of determination stirring inside her. For the first time in years, she felt like she had control over her own life, like the pain that had once defined her was no longer the loudest voice in her mind. The quiet strength she had found on the farm, through the farmer's patience, the rhythm of the work, and her own healing, was finally starting to take root. She was no longer the person she had been when she first arrived. She had changed. Over the next few months, Maya threw herself into her new project. She cleaned up the little area in the barn, carefully arranging her tools and supplies. She began to plant small flowers, herbs, and vegetables. Simple things, but they grew steadily, and watching them bloom and thrive gave her a sense of purpose. Every time she worked in the garden, she felt more at peace with herself. She was growing just like the plants she cared for, and with each new bloom, she could feel the old parts of herself, those feelings of doubt, fear, and worthlessness fading just a little more. The farmer continued to support her, offering advice when needed but always respecting her independence. He would stop by occasionally to ask how the garden was coming along, but he never pushed. He gave her the freedom to make mistakes, to learn, and to grow. It wasn't about perfection, it was about the process, and that process, for Maya, was just as important as the result. One afternoon, as spring began to show its first signs of life, Maya stood in front of the garden she had created. The flowers she had planted were blooming, and the vegetables she had nurtured were beginning to bear fruit. The garden was a small thing, but to her it felt like a reflection of her own growth. She had started with nothing but a desire to heal and had built something beautiful from that desire. As she stood there, taking in the sight of her work, the farmer walked up beside her. He didn't say anything at first. He simply stood next to her, looking out at the garden in silence. "You've done a great job, Maya," he said after a moment. "I knew you had it in you." Maya smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "I didn't do it alone," she said, her voice soft but sure. "I had help. You showed me how to believe in myself again." The farmer nodded, his face warm with approval. "You were always capable. You just needed to realize it." Maya looked at the garden again, her eyes taking in the vibrant colors and the life that had sprouted from the soil. For the first time in a long time, she saw something in herself that had been hidden beneath the weight of her past. She saw strength. She saw resilience. She saw hope, and most importantly, she saw a future. It wasn't perfect, and it wouldn't be easy. There would still be hard days ahead. But Maya knew now that she was ready to face them. She was ready to keep moving forward. The past had shaped her, yes, but it no longer controlled her. She was no longer defined by the pain, the mistakes, or the fear that had once ruled her life. She had found a new path, one that was full of possibility. She had found her strength, and with it, she had begun to build a life worth living. And as the seasons changed once again, Maya knew that her journey was only just beginning. She had the tools, the support, and the belief in herself to keep going, and that was all she needed.